Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to our Committee of Council for the 25th of May, 2021. I'm Mayor Grant Smith, and I'd like to welcome everybody. I'll just go through the health and safety for you, as we have members of the public here, and a warm welcome to you all. When we get the health and safety back on, here we go. Right. If in the unlikely event of an emergency, if we could please evacuate to the assembly area, follow the staff and to the clock tower, Te Mariahine, the square. In terms of, this is a no smoking facility obviously. Again, unlike the event of needing a defibrillator, that is located in front of house. And look, if there are any incidences, please report them to the committee administrator. Right, we are recording this meeting and welcome to anybody online as well. It is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel and please, councillors, if you just say your name as you go to speak if there is questions. The same with the presenters, please. So we'll go through to our first order of business here, apologies. For today, and received from Councillors Lou Finlay, Councillors Vaughan Dennison and Councillor Pat Hancock, who has early departure. I'll look to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. No questions, comments about that? We will vote, please. It's passed, 12 votes for, none against. Thank you. Right, we'll move to number 2, which is additional items. There's none that I've had any knowledge of. So we'll move through to declarations of interest. Again, I haven't been notified of anything. So we'll move on to number 4, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the 17th of February 2021, Part 1 public meeting be confirmed as a true and correct record. Again, I'll look to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Are there any matters arising? There being none, I'll ask you to vote, please. It's passed 12 votes for, none against. Thank you. Moving through to number 5, which is appointment of chairs for the following sessions. So we have, the committee resolves that chairs for the following remaining sessions be agreed as following. For today, 7 to 9 p.m, Councillor Renee Dingwell. For Thursday, 27th of May, 9 to 12, Councillor Brent Barrett. Thursday the 27th of May, 1 to 4 p.m, Councillor Bruno Petrinas. Thursday 27th of May, 7 to 9 p.m, Councillor Pat Hancock. Friday the 28th of May, 9 till 12 p.m, Councillor Zolfa Kabat. And then Friday, our final session on the 28th of May, 1 to 4 p.m, Councillor Karen Naylor. I'll look to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any comments? There being none, we will vote. That has passed 12 votes for, none against. Right, we will, this is a bit of procedure, councillors, just extension of the meeting time. So we will move that the committee resolves as per the standing order 2.1.7 that the meeting will be extended until 5 p.m. on Friday, the 28th of May 2021. I'll look to move that. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. There being no comments or questions, we will vote, please. It's passed 12 votes for. Thank you. Number 7 is hearing of submissions and of our proposed long-term plan, LTP 2021 to 31. And again, we resolve that the Committee of Council receive the submissions on the proposed long-term plan 2021 to 31 and hear from presenters who indicate their wish to be heard in support of their submission. And number 2, that the committee note the procedure for hearing of submissions as described in the procedure sheet. Again, I'll look to move those. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Are there any comments or questions to those? There being none, vote please. And that is passed 12 votes for, none against. Right. So if we could refer submitters to the procedure sheet, there should be hard copies there for you on the table, and they've all been sent out to people in advance. If you could, as you're asked to come up to present, if you could, obviously the microphone there, we push the button to turn the microphone on, and you've been allotted a time. We're going to keep pretty strictly to this timing. We have the traffic light system there, so you have 10 minutes each, and the traffic light will go on and give you 8, is it 8? What's the time?
Yeah, the light moves to orange when there's 3 minutes, and to red when there's 1 minute.
Yeah. So 3 minutes it goes through to orange, 1 minute to red. But if I could just say to all submitters, we have read your submissions, thank you, very thoroughly, many hours of that. So you can almost be taken, everything is being read, but please, up to you how you want to summarise that, and councillors, leave a little bit of time if you can for councillors' questions. Right, we will move to our first submitter, which, councillors, is James Russell, and that's submission number 17. So, James, welcome.
Good morning, Your Worship, and ladies and gentlemen. Would you like me to start now? Okay. Right, well, thank you very much for taking the time to read my submission and everybody else's and having me here today. I've just got some notes here to ensure I stay succinct because I know it'll be a long day. So first of all, a bit of background. I've been, only recently have I moved back to Palmerston North. I've previously spent many years here. My employer has basically kept me bouncing between Canterbury and the Metre region. So now I'm back here, and pleased to be back here as well. My submission has 2 main gists, which I'd like to summarise. The first main gist is to please take less money, spend less money, and do less in terms of regulations. And the second main gist is to please be more like Canterbury in terms of freeing up the land for housing. Big concern I have reading the 10-year plan is the auditor's reports saying, and I'm quoting here, the underlying information and assumptions in the consultation document are not reasonable because they are inconsistent with the council's financial strategy. The forecasts in the consultation document show the council plans to exceed its debt cap after year 4 of the long-term plan. So the way I read it is that we can't afford the plan as it's written. Or we can only afford it if you tax future ratepayers through debt or current ratepayers through higher rates. Therefore, I would like to urge everybody to change the plan so that we do not exceed those debt caps and that we do not need to increase the rates burden on Manawatu residents, particularly in the current economic climate with COVID disruptions and stuff like that. People simply do not have the money to spend on nice-to-haves rather than must-haves. So I've got some brief thoughts that I'll have on how that can be achieved. First thought I have, and this is, while I admit this will save only a few pennies rather than the big commitments that the council must spend, first thought is, do we need international relations? Do we need sister city relationships? And if the answer to that is yes, we do, then can I further ask you to ask, do we need sister city relationships with communist Chinese-run cities, in particular the 2 sister cities we have of Guiyang and Kunshan? Our Parliament has just passed a resolution condemning the human rights abuses in Xinjiang province. Do we want to be maintaining relationships with communist Chinese regimes whilst they are committing what is genocide, or what has been watered down in our Parliament to be merely human rights abuses? So I think Palmerston North City Council can take a moral stand and cease those relationships. You could also take a further stand and save money by ceasing all relationships and leaving international relations up to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade at central government. Second thing, this isn't so much about saving money, but it's more about allowing house prices to not escalate as much as they are, and I'm saying that as someone currently trying and failing to buy a house here in Palmerston North, having previously owned. The house price inflation here is insane. It is not in line with wage inflation, and people are hurting. So the way I propose that be dealt with, in part, is simply remove the urban boundary. Do what Canterbury did in the wake of the earthquakes, where the zoning was modified so that there was no effective rural and urban boundary, as there is here in Palmerston North. If people want to develop land for houses, please let them. I know that's not a silver bullet, and prices will still keep rising, and there are further challenges with infrastructure and pipelines and stuff like that, but the problem is exacerbated by the boundary which imposes an artificial scarcity of land. So please do what you can to free up all land for housing if developers want to develop them. Going back to how we can save some money, do we need an economic development agency in Palmerston North City Council? The 10-year plan seemed to propose either maintaining it at its current level of funding or increasing its level of funding. I'd like to see a business case where we simply don't have it at all. Get out of the way of businesses doing business and let them get on. There's also, in the long-term plan, a discussion about arts funding. I would like to argue, in light of the auditors' reports about the fiscal unsustainability of the plan, that there is no remit for arts, either morally or fiscally. So why does the council need to fund arts? And if we do, can I please question the measure of success that explicitly calls for race-based funding? And I'm quoting here that the measure of success is an increase in the diversity of funding recipients as measured by self-reported ethnicity from information provided by applicants. If art is good, surely it doesn't matter what skin colour the artist has. I'd also urge you that I do not believe that there is sufficient need or role for a council to be funding community development. Communities will thrive through things such as churches, temples, mosques, sports, civics organisations, etc. And I think council is a poor agency to develop community. I think the best community development happens when council simply gets out of the way. I also understand the need to provide social housing, which was talked about in the long-term plan. I absolutely agree that our most vulnerable and weakest do need to be looked after. However, I think in terms of social housing, the solution should come from central government with their greater resources and dedicated agencies. I also think that social housing can be improved by lighter regulations, as I have already described, and that includes land use and the ability to build smaller houses with fewer regulations in land currently allocated for urban use. However, I'm not a completely heartless Tory wanting you to completely gut every program that you run. There are some good things that I'd like you to see kept up, such as increased cycling opportunities. There's no reason Palmerston North shouldn't be one of the most cyclable cities in the country, if that's a word. And the shared pathway along the river is a great thing to go ahead on, so please keep that up. My bottom line is please do less with less. Allow housing through lighter regulation and effectively abolishing any urban-rural boundaries. I urge you to further read the former Reserve Bank economist Michael Riddell, who publishes widely on these subjects. And I'd also like to urge you, mainly from a moral point of view, to cease sister-city relationships, particularly with communist Chinese-run cities. That's all. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, James. We have a number of councillors that wish to ask a question or two. I'll start with the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, James, for your comments. I've just got two questions for you. So you've obviously read the material because you've talked on a range of things. So I assume that you're aware that the Three Waters infrastructure is going to be removed and won't actually be from year 4 onwards. So I'm just trying to understand your comments around the debt levels and your concern around that, considering the waters are going anyway, so we won't be exceeding our debt levels. So are you, the programs you're suggesting, things like Sister Cities, CEDA, others, are you still wanting those removed, or are you just wanting those removed if Three Waters doesn't for some reason go ahead?
I'd urge you to remove them regardless of the removal of Three Waters. Palmerston North residents are still going to be paying for those Three Waters either through central government taxation or through rates. So there still is a cost for those things, and the cost is going to be huge. I can see it's central government's going to tax us higher to pay for those very expensive things. I'd still urge you to save money wherever you can.
Okay, thank you. And then just my next question was, you have some quite wide views on the land and availability for building. Is your view that any land should be protected, high-class soils, anything like that, or do you think that the land should really just be completely opened up to the free market for people to use it how they wish?
Some land should be protected, not for soils, but some land that should be protected should be for cultural values or things like that, or heritage values. There should be protections for that. However, with regards to soils, I'll refer you to an example, Albany in Auckland. When I was growing up in Auckland, Albany was a great strawberry producing region, and when the proposal was to open that land up for housing, the comments were that we wouldn't be able to eat strawberries again in New Zealand because all these great soils for strawberries were going to be taken up by houses. Well, guess what? We can still eat plenty of strawberries. There's plenty of land available to grow things around here, and I believe the land around Palmerston North that is being used for food will continue to be produced wherever it is. If the most profitable use of the land is for housing, then that's the use that it should be used for. So yeah, the free market should decide that, and no, there should be no protection for soils around Palmerston North.
Thank you for your comments.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, James, for your comments. My question is around your description under connected communities of the library as being, and I quote, far too woke and culturally Marxist. Can you explain what you mean by that?
That's not a criticism of the Palmerston North Library. Sorry if I was vague in that. It's a criticism of other libraries that I see the direction libraries going to. Look, I love libraries. I'm a student at Massey whilst also being here, so I spend a lot of my weekends in libraries. I just want to urge all funding for the library to not to be agnostic of political aspirations, and observing other libraries around the country and around the world, there is a tendency for them to delve into some particularly woke and left-wing tendencies. I think a library should focus on its core purpose of providing a wide range of information, particularly written information, to a wide-ranging community. So it's more of an observation I have made of other libraries going down that woke path.
Right, thank you. And in terms of council not being involved in community development, that seems to me a little bit at odds with your then support for social housing. So how do you reconcile those two things? My
support for social housing is limited. When I'm talking about the council development, I'm talking about funding given to funding given to particular programs to do with culture, religion and ethnicity and stuff like that. My support for social housing is very qualified and it's very limited and it should be very targeted. And I would rather that actually it all be done by either central government or preferably charities, or even better yet, through wide-ranging availability of cheap housing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right, thank you, James. That's the 10 minutes up. I apologise to the councillors who had questions in the queue there. Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, our next submitter, we've had just a little change here, is Lorenzo, Tamika and Katana. If you could come forward, please. So this is submissions 406, 407 and 409. And great to see our tamariki in the chamber. And I believe you were here yesterday as well. So welcome, and if you just turn your microphones on, and again, we've read your submissions, but if you'd want to either summarise them, and again, councillors will ask you questions at the end. Thank you.
Good morning, my commission is about bike stands. These ones are okay, but they are quite hard to use, and they are and they can damage your tyres if you lean on your bike. I think these ones, if those would be good to near the car park by the in the square, CCTV pointing at it. I think these ones are obvious and easy to use. Good for small parks. I think these ones should be used more like on Broadway and shopping centres and places like that.
These ones look good if that's important.
These ones will look good if that's important.
They're a good size.
But they're a good size and are safe to use. And then I got this. We need more bus parking places around town, and we need more CCTV in like all of the shops to help with security. And the one what I just did, we need more bike stands to lock our bikes at the river and the square especially. And we need more bike lanes in the city, especially on Metre's line, because it is very busy down there and it can get busy at times. And we need more drive in town for 12 to 19 years old. Thank you for listening to my commission.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Right.
Good morning. And today I'm here to talk about the speed bumps I was originally here to talk about the speed bumps at MedLab, the Palms on Ferguson Street, but Ferguson Street is quite a busy street, and I think speed bumps are kind of unnecessary. So, with MedLab, the Palms on Ferguson Street, the drive-through, like when you drive through and then the parking lots are there, it's kind of narrow, and it's kind of unsafe there because it's too narrow. There wouldn't be need if the space, the parking lots and the drive-through got expanded. Like, yeah. It's also, the speed bumps are also kind of a threat to cyclists because if they ride over too fast, they may fall off and injure themselves. Plus, going over the speed bumps safely, it takes the attention away from the drivers and of their surroundings, and it can, like, yeah, it's kind of dangerous. It's probably a risk to drivers, their passengers, cyclists, and pedestrians. Plus, I've been told that by a friend that when people drive over the speed bumps, they tend to swerve a little. They tend to swerve a little. But since Ferguson is a busy street, There is very high traffic there, and speed bumps are unnecessary because they slow down the traffic as well. And sometimes intersections are too close to pedestrian crossings, which in case when turning, they may forget that there's people crossing. What you could, I know you're not in charge of like the roads, but if you could pass this on to like the people who are in charge of the roads, that would be very helpful. What you could do is move speed bumps to take away distractions, move pedestrian crossings to safer places and away from intersections and street corners, construct pedestrian overpasses or bridges over the streets, and widen roads and car parks for better access. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Katana.
Hello Council, Nathan White, loci parentis teacher, also responsible for these students. Katana has an excellent submission, and with your permission, would you like me to help you read that out? So the points that Katana has down here is that she thinks this is why we need to have a zoo in Palmerston North. Her first point, in New Plymouth at Brooklands, they have a zoo with a petting zoo for people to interact with the animals and learn about them, which she thinks is pretty cool. She encourages council to go to their website, which can be easily accessed through their council website also. She wanted you to know that they have cool things like alpacas, chickens, kunu pigs, and other domestic birds like guinea fowl. She's made several other points here. She says she thinks we should have a petting zoo, which is in addition to her original submission. We should have a petting zoo for people who like animals and want to see them. Lots of people don't have pets or appreciate animals, so it will help. Would you like to read something? She says that pets are calming and good for people's health, but not everyone is ready for or can afford a pet. She mentions that we used to have birds in cages at the Esplanade and in Fielding, but they weren't nice for the animals, and we could do a better job now. She mentions that Massey University could help look after the animals because they have a vet school, and she has said that PNCC could partner with them, partnership with them. She mentions the Wildlife Recovery Centre in the Esplanade and thinks that's really cool, but she says lots of types of animals get hurt, not just native birds, and she thinks that having a zoo would help other animals who get hurt. And as a side, it was something that we actually discussed together, didn't we, about cat owners should have bells on them so they don't kill native birds. Well, the council could offer free collars with bells when they register their cats. Would you like to say the last bit? She'd like to thank you for hearing her submission. She's very passionate about animals.
Great, thank you. Right, we've probably got enough time for one question. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks all three of you for coming in again today to share your submissions. I wonder if one of you would just like to explain why you've submitted to the council's long-term plan. What started this interest for you?
Well, this was just for social studies, where we did look at the 10-year plan, and we were told to do a submission because we were doing, we were studying the government in social studies. But I think that it's a good thing we did do this because we are trying to fight for change.
Fantastic. And one more, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to all three of you for coming in. Those are really great submissions. Ymca, just wanted to ask a question about the roads. It turns out that council does actually manage quite a few of the roads, so it's really helpful hearing from you about that. One of the reasons that speed bumps is put in is to slow down cars, obviously. So if we took those out, what would you like to see us do to help cars travel at a safe speed?
Maybe just put like more of those signs where like with the speed limits, like, or more traffic lights.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you taking the time, and also to the school around the civics education. It's great to see. All right, our next submitter is Roger Ball. So, councillors, that's submission number 96. And I understand there is some extra additional material as well. Welcome, Roger.
Good morning, Your Worship, Mr Smith, councillors. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and make a submission in relation to the 10-year plan. I'll change my glasses, will be helpful. Well, I'm here to present counter-arguments against the present council's proposal for urban spread onto soils west of the city. The proposal is described online as under the title Kaka Tangiata. It's about 700 hectares in extent. The study group has issued a fact sheet about this urban growth study and listed their specialist team. There is no mention of a soil scientist, an agronomist, or a rural land user in that team. I hope that my submission will provide some counterbalance to this oversight. The comments I will make about elite soils, or that I have made, apply to most of this area in general. My warnings about other risks, flood risk for instance, are directed more at the block of land about 250 hectares, which is bounded by the Mangaoni stream, Longburn-Rontier Road, Pioneer Highway, and commonly referred to as the Anders Road block. We lived there in this block for 30 years. The recent alluvial soils to the west of the city are highly productive. Indeed, they're so highly productive that we term them elite soils. I've previously made a detailed submission about these soils to council about 8 years ago, and I'll summarise here very briefly. These soils are arguably among the most versatile and productive soils in the country. The better a soil is, the wider range of crops it will grow, with high yields at the least expense. Finally, these short soils should be retained for future food production. Now, that little piece there is the most important science-based piece of information in my submission. So there's an awful lot in it, but just to stress again that these are arguably among the best soils in the country. They produce a very wide range of crops, can do, and they should be protected for future food production. I go on through a number of concerns as I see them, which don't seem to have been dealt with very fully in the published material about the 10-year plan. flooding is one that I mentioned in relation to the Anders Road block. Liquefaction, that's dealt with reasonably well, and most of us understand that now. I raise a number of questions about insurability and the cost of building in this area if it goes ahead. I think this proposal requires an answer to these questions. And finally, I make mention of the current political climate and move on with my conclusions. Right, I have attached a summary of my qualifications and personal experience. I believe that the Council should consult further with other science-based individuals to understand fully the counter-arguments and the risks associated with this proposed urbanisation of 700 hectares to the west side of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ball. That's great, and appreciate your extra comments there. I've got a couple of questions, and I just may jump in on the first one. Now, you state that this is these soils that we'll call it out the west is elite class soils, i.e. class 1 and 2. But the reports that we've got say it's class 3 and 4 with a little bit of class 2 soil. So I understand the protection or what you're trying to achieve around the protection of high-class soils, and that's more like Tamatai Road, River Silt and Kairanga Loam soils. Have you got a document that says these are very high-class soils?
No, it's my appreciation of the state of those soils. They have in the past been protected for agricultural or horticultural use. It seems to me that one of their primary protectors has now disappeared from the scene, being the Kairanga County Council, and I don't think I'm avoiding your question. Government has now taken up the torch, obviously, of trying to protect elite soils on the boundaries of cities.
Yeah, and we're party to that. In fact, we've got a policy where we just don't build over them.
It is a long while since I looked at the pedological description of every block of soil. I did actually have difficulty from the published materials working out exactly where the 700 hectares is going to be. It would be a long time since I looked at the pedological detail of all those areas of soil, and also hampered by the fact that I'm not quite sure where they are.
Sure, I understand. Great. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Roger, for your submission. I wondered if you were aware of the process that the government's currently going through to produce a national policy statement on highly productive land, which would then bind council when it comes to rezoning such land. Are you aware of that process?
Sorry, my hearing is very poor, and I don't quite follow everything.
The government's policy, are you aware of the policy of the government?
Yes, I am aware that they are formulating law to specifically protect elite soils from further urban development.
So the process for rezoning that land would involve a hearing at which, once that MPS was in place, we would be obliged as a council to consider that soil and whether or not it was suitable for a purpose other than agriculture. So I understand you're having difficulty hearing me. I guess I'm just making sure you're aware that there are checks and balances in the system. So not all of the information about how we would make a decision on that land is in the 10-year plan. much of it will come out through technical reports at a hearing.
Thank you. In summary, I think that you're saying you have proposing to have further study on the matter, and obviously the impact of government legislation is not yet known because the legislation hasn't been passed, from comment from myself.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. Just over here, Dr. Ball, and thank you for your comments. We do need to provide more housing somewhere in the city, right? I guess I would start from that proposition. If we're not going in that direction, do you have a view around whether we would expand into other greenfield areas, other farming areas, or should it be met more through intensification and building, say, apartments in the city centre? Do you have a view around how that should be prioritised?
No, I've not specifically looked at that. Of course, I am enthusiastically a supporter of intensification in the city boundary. But every time I drive to Ashurst, I see an awful lot of open land, farmland, that is on much lower quality soils west of the city.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Ball. It's great. We will consider your submission, and thank you for taking the time to put it in and the extra information you provided today. We appreciate that. Right, our next submitter is Rob Yule. So, councillors, this is submission 124. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Thank you for the privilege of allowing citizens to interact with you in the future of this city. I've spent 15 and a half years as minister of St Albans Church, and my wife and I chose to return here to retirement from Central Auckland 11 years ago, so a total of 26 years that we've lived here. I tell my Auckland friends, get a life, come to Palmerston North. These are specific suggestions. They don't interact with the plan as a whole, but I think they would help both beautify the city and make it more convivial for public gatherings and for the pedestrian traffic of the inner city. My suggestion to put an overarching clear roof over Broadway to connect downtown and the Regent is the major proposal that I wish to make here. I suggest that it could be high priority, and to save the council money, maybe make a competition among architects for a design. This builds upon the council's commitment to placemaking. I'm thinking of how it would enhance the Regent and particularly events like graduations and protect from the rain, which unfortunately can occur at inconvenient times in Palmerston North. The second proposal about roofing the area between downtown and the courthouse, I'm more hesitant about because I recognise that it impinges upon issues relating to the bus terminal and decisions about whether that's expanded or not. And I would suggest as a lower priority one, but I'd like it considered, and I wonder whether a way to do this might be to extend the present roof designs of the bus terminal towards the law court and towards downtown. But I'm particularly trying to address means of helping redress, I think, the loss of pedestrian congeniality in those areas of Main Street and Broadway since the plaza went in. And I think extending the roof lines of the bus terminal might be a simple way of ensuring a greater pedestrian facility in that area. The third suggestion is a little bit parochial since I live in Ward Street, but I made this proposal when Ward Street was raised to a connector road status some years ago. I presume connector means connecting the top end of Victoria Avenue, which has big traffic, with Rangatiki Street and the northern exit of Palmerston North. Since that time, there has been an amazing redevelopment of Ward Street. On my count, we've got 34 new townhouses since my wife and I came there 11 years ago, and I think a simple means of beautifying a street that's a little bit bland, but is a major thoroughfare. On further thought, I actually wonder whether instead of small spring flowering trees, which can be a little bit spreading, using a tree which is indigenous to the Manawatu, the rewa, grows tall, slender, and doesn't drop too much debris, could be a very attractive feature along that street. Those are my 3 practical suggestions.
Thank you, Rob. And have a number of councillors wishing to speak, and we'll start with Councillor Hapata.
Rob, I'm over here. Thanks for your suggestions. Just one from me was around the roof from Broadway to downtown. We've discussed it at council a few times. How do you think we're going to fund that? What are your suggestions around that?
I think it should come from rates because it would benefit the entire city and the city would be pleased with it.
Okay. The putting the archway over for the bus terminal, that's a different kettle of fish altogether. You think the same thing, funding it through rates?
Yes, I do, and that's why I made the suggestion of perhaps extending the roof line of the present bus terminal if it's decided to retain the bus terminal in that area, which I think is working well and could be extended towards the law courts and downtown.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your suggestions.
Just following on from Councillor Hapata, Rob, there is a scoping design for the wider Streets for People project, which is around our central city, and it includes Broadway. So there is opportunities and some initial design work or concept designs that came out to councillors, would be 18 months ago now, did include a possible connector between downtown and the Regent. So I'm just saying that there is a possibility there. The bus terminal definitely it's time for what that looks like. And I don't disagree with you around street trees. I think they're a necessity. Now we'll go now to other councillors. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, and thanks for your submission. Was just interested sort of the juxtaposition of your desire for street trees in Ward Street, but your solutions in the city centre were sort of hard infrastructure rather than trees and those sorts of things. Your views on where trees fit in the city centre, or do they fit in the city centre?
I recognise the issue of birds. It's a peculiar problem. I do love the trees in the square. I don't think they have been terribly missed when they were taken out of, was it Main Street? But maybe more planter boxes and attractive features like that. But I think protection from the elements would greatly enhance those inner city areas. That's behind my proposal.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your submission. I'm taking your comments about coverings on streets as support for pedestrianism generally. And I wondered, you've talked about covering to protect from the elements. Do you think that's the only issue that stops pedestrian use of our city? How can we help create a better pedestrian environment if we can't go as far as hard infrastructure?
I haven't given enough thought to that. I don't know. I personally feel that concepts like this would greatly enhance the pedestrian feel, giving a little bit of the attractiveness, say, of the plaza to the wider central area of Palmerston North, I think would be a huge enhancement, pedestrian traffic. Parking buildings, those sort of things do help, I think, bring people into the inner city, whether extending the free times of parking buildings, but that's a very useful benefit. I certainly make use of that. But it's the pedestrian friendliness of the inner city that I'm concerned about, particularly since the plaza has pulled so much of the conviviality from Main Streets and Broadway.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Rob. That's all the questions gone. We thank, again, like others, we thank you for your submission, and everything will be considered.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, councillors, moving on to Swim Manawatu. Sarah, welcome. This is submission number 175. Kia ora, Sarah, welcome.
Kia ora. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the opportunity again for members of the public to be able to come in and address you. I sit on the board of Swimming Manawatu, so I represent in that capacity 1,056 Swimming New Zealand affiliated members in our region, but I also sit here today on behalf of the wider swimming community in Palmerston North. Council's own plan acknowledges swimming as the second most popular recreational activity behind walking. And we're really passionate that it is about time that we prioritise our facilities to recognise and support this. We're unsure at the moment in the current environment how we can fulfil PNCC's goal to be one of the most active communities in New Zealand without the right facilities. For years we've taken the approach of putting a plaster over the issue, but the projected growth, again, according to Council, in the next 10 years is going to put even further pressure on the facilities that we have at the moment, and we think that now's the time to, rather than put a plaster, but actually address the wound itself. The swimming community is supportive, very supportive in fact, of a multi-purpose facility. We actually think this is a really sensible approach, and we have had early discussions with other codes. Swimming Manawatu is very open to taking that collaborative approach and working with Sport Manawatu and the other interested parties. I just want to explain a little bit, and apologies if I assume some, maybe all of you know this, but I just want to explain a little bit in the swimming language that we use, the difference between short course and long course. So as you would have seen in my submission, the issue that we have at the moment is lane space. From the 1,056 competitive swimmers that we have in the area, a lot of them are really struggling with access to long course facilities. So the only long course pool, which is a 50-metre pool, is the outdoor pool that we've got at the Lido. The outdoor pool is obviously uncovered, and what it means for our community is right now, at a time where they should be training for the meets that are coming up at the end of the year, there are no long course training opportunities available to them. So there is a difference between short course and long course, the 25-metre pool and the 50-metre pool, and the way those times are accounted for, and technically speaking, things like turns and all of that sort of stuff make a big difference. So when we're training for long course events, short course pool just doesn't cut the mustard, unfortunately. All clubs, as I mentioned in the submission, all clubs at the moment have waiting lists. Most clubs lose prime time opportunity, particularly with the school kids between 3 and 6 p.m. To the parents around the table, you'll know that getting access to a pool from 5:30 till 7:30 at night is actually a really difficult time when you've got children and you're trying to engage them in the sport. And another really relevant point is that only 14% of our competitive swimmers can be held in Freiburg, where we have our meets. And I know we've hosted several of you at our meets over the last year, so you would have seen the congestion, the lack of space for an event that involves a lot of spectators. There is no room for spectators. There's safety concerns when we have those events because we don't have any meet management space, so we have cables running alongside the pool. We have swimmers walking amongst technical officials, amongst people. We can't meet the requirements of space for technical officials around the swimming pool. There's a lot of those difficulties that we have to juggle. And I kind of liken it to imagine telling 80% of rugby players that there's not enough room for them to play this weekend, because that's the position that we're in. Yeah, I guess those are the main points that I wanted to make today, and I just want to reiterate that we're really keen to work with you in a collaborative sense to find the right solution for the swimming community and the other water sports moving forward. Thank you.
Great, thanks Sarah. Look, congratulations too. That obviously, in some ways, is a good problem to have too many customers. But look, swimming's obviously changed from just the summer sport now to an all year round sport. And you have engaged with Sport Manawatu around because we get a lot of guidance from Sport Manawatu around that sport facilities, regional sports facilities plan.
Yes, we have. So we're in the process of that at the moment, and we'll continue to do that, of course. It's in line, what we're trying to achieve is in line with their own goals and objectives as well, so it makes sense for us to do that.
Great.
We're hoping we can add council to the list.
Okay, I've just fired up all the councillors, all the questions are coming. Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks for your submission. We have had quite a lot of submissions around swimming facilities.
Great.
Which we'll be pleased to hear, since they're mostly supportive of more. One of the solutions that has been suggested is covering the 50-metre outdoor pool at the Lido. And I wonder if you think that that on its own is enough of a solution, or whether you feel that actually it's not so much providing winter swimming facilities that are indoor that's the problem, it's the size of the facility. I'm not quite clear as to which of those you would see as preferable.
Sure. We've discussed that as well, and I guess that for us falls into the category of putting a plaster over it again. It's a very old facility, and I'm no engineer, but I can imagine that the process of covering that is not going to be as cost effective as what we might imagine at the moment. And then, of course, the outcome is a facility that still won't meet the requirements for us to host any national events. So, for example, I mentioned earlier, we need, when we host a meet, we need marshalling areas, we need facilities for meet management, all of those extra things as well. And so simply putting a roof over that facility that's there is not going to fulfil those goals. In addition, with us taking a collaborative approach with the other codes of swimming, for example, one of those is water polo, and water polo has a depth requirement too, which putting a roof over that pool at the Lido is not going to fulfil that either.
Okay, that's really helpful, thank you.
Councillor Harper.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr Mayor. Thanks, Sarah. Just following on from what Councillor Johnson said, would you suggest that we did a feasibility going forward?
Yes, I think so, because we're starting to take we are taking a different approach now, and certainly all the water codes around the region are keen to work together, and that introduces a different dynamic. What water polo need, what canoe polo need, what swimming need, what triathlon need, potentially all different things there. We do support the feasibility study. However, we would very much like to be involved in that, because it's all very well, I think the proposed sum is $104,000, and it's all very well bringing in someone from outside the region and paying them that sum of money to come up with a feasibility study, but we're all here and we're free, and we're quite willing to sit down and engage and discuss with regards to what we need, and I think that actually our input would be very valuable.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Sarah. really heard from you quite clearly, I think, around the sort of competitive and organized sports side of it. Could you give us a little bit of a lens around just the water safety and sort of water training that youth might need to be safe in the water?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a duopoly in the region for Learn to Swim. So the clubs, the swimming clubs themselves, we all have an ethos around water safety. However, none. There might be one actually, are actually able to do that because we don't have the facility, we don't have Learn to Swim pools. So the Learn to Swim pools at the moment are under the control of CLM. There is a private one, Hilton Brown, that operate out of West End, but the rest of us don't have the facilities to even consider offering that at this point. So it is difficult because we often end up with conflicting, again, families with conflicting schedules trying to be in, transfer kids from one to another pool, trying to get that follow through from a club perspective, that dynamic of having, we've got kids on sidelines watching older siblings participate but being unable to participate themselves, all of those sorts of things. Yeah.
Thanks. So then in terms of if we look at feasibility, your view around scope of that would be that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but does it need to include both the competitive swim training as well as water safety for youngsters?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Sarah. Sarah, what's the closest 50-metre pool to Palmerston North?
That's a great question. There is a 50-metre pool in Martin, which is the closest one. After that, it's Wellington. The Martin pool's only open for 5 months of the year, and of course, that's a 45-minute drive away. So again, when you're juggling children after school, and sorry, another addition to that is that swim sessions for the sort of 12 plus are actually 2 hours long. So by the time you drive 45 minutes to Martin and train for 2 hours and drive 45 minutes back again, it's a significant commitment and difficult challenge for families to manage.
So that's not an indoor pool?
It is an indoor pool, yes. It's a 50-metre indoor community pool that they have out there, but again, it's only open for 5 months of the year. So actually what you'll notice most of our members do is they drive to Wellington, and the Kilburnie pool is the nearest one that they utilise.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks again for your submission and everybody else from Swimming Manawatu. And again, things will definitely be considered, and we appreciate comments. All right, we move now to the Lions Club of Middle Districts, Craig Hart, and that's 302 submission.
Good morning, Mr Mayor and councillors. So the Mayor has said I'm representing the Lions Club of Middle Districts, a Palmerston North Lions Club which is registered as a charity. Our club has been operating since 1968 and over the years has contributed significantly by way of funds raised and by way of social goodwill to the citizens of Palmerston North. Over the past 3.5 years, we've been working with council staff with a view to constructing and operating an 18-hole mini golf course in the Victoria Esplanade. We recently obtained a resource consent for the project and are now embarking upon our fundraising with a view to commencing construction in late spring this year. It's been acknowledged by council staff that a mini golf course in the Esplanade will enhance that facility as a recreational destination for families and children of all ages. After all our course maintenance obligations and lease commitments on the mini golf course have been met, all surplus income will be expended for charitable purposes. For us as a club, the cost. We are finalising our costings, but early calculations indicate that the total market rate cost for the project will be nearly $300,000. Our club has paid some $12,000 to date in procuring the resource consent, and we have another $40,000 that we've earmarked for the project. The reason for this submission is firstly to provide you with a heads up that the project is going to happen, and we're excited about that, because it is going to significantly benefit the recreational facilities of the city. But secondly, we are seeking some Palmerston North City Council financial support. The site that we've been allocated to the west of the children's play area is very wet in winter, and that's perhaps the reason it's never been significantly utilised until now. And as a result of being so wet, it will need to be built up. The site will therefore require significant fill and then comprehensive drainage to link the site drainage to the existing Esplanade drainage system. Our preliminary estimate is that the commercial rate for the site works and the drainage will be between $30,000 and $35,000. And it's our request from the council that they fund this specific work either in cash or in kind or in both. That is for the site works and the drainage. The mini golf course lease will be for a term of 10 years with a right of renewal for 10 years. During that time, the course will provide another wonderful family amenity for the city. As importantly, there is potential over the life of the project for significant charitable funds to be expended annually to better the lives of needy citizens in Palmerston North. Thank you for the opportunity to give you a heads up as to our project.
Great, thanks Craig. Appreciate the update and again, and all the good work that the Lions Service Clubs do in our city. I'll open it up for questions. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Craig, for coming in and speaking to us. I've just got a couple of questions. So with your the figure of 250k, was that just specifically for the build, or did that include the 30 to 35k for the drainage and design and consent?
No, that's everything.
So that'll be total project
yes.
cost? Okay, thank you. Do you recall what the original cost in 2017 was expected to be? Because I think, if I remember correctly, there'd been quite a firm view that there wouldn't be any contribution from council required apart from the land. So I'm just wondering if costs had gone up or if it perhaps
well,
it wasn't
our
quite
costing council is done on the basis that it is a commercial costing. We hope that we will do it for much less than that. We've got lots of favours that we're going to call on, but that's very difficult to quantify and cost, and we don't know how generous the commercial arm of the city will be in the project. But it was really only after investigating the project further that we've determined the additional, perhaps hidden costs that there'll be. And while we knew this was a wet site, the design is going to require fill to build it up so that we have good drainage, otherwise it won't be utilisable in the winter. So yes, our costings initially were ballpark, but as a result of the evolving of the project that we've worked through with council staff on, and I have to acknowledge around the table that they've been extremely helpful. The kiosk that we're going to operate from is much bigger. Previously, it was a little hut before, so that in itself will add about $50,000 to the project on a commercial basis.
And once you've got all the funds required, what's your expected completion time?
Well, once 6 months,
Great.
Because we'll need to fit it in with some voluntary support, or at least support in kind.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your submission. I read recently, and I think it must have been in a newspaper article, that the proposed fees for families were around $20. Is that right?
We haven't. That's an estimate at this stage, and that's been a guide councillor utilised on the costs that are being charged in other facilities around the country.
So have you done an estimate maybe of what income and expenses you would have, say, on a yearly basis, so that you are able to anticipate what the income from this would be going forward?
The income based on what fielding charge, and the fielding mini golf is extremely successful. Their income is well in excess of $50,000, and we think that because of the opportunity we've been given in this location, that there's an opportunity for income to be significantly greater than that here. Because we're a charity, those funds will all go back in, not totally to the city, because some of the projects we support, Ronald McDonald House, the liver transplant facility in Auckland, those sort of things are nationwide charitable entities, but all that money, and we expect it could be between $50,000 and $100,000, and over 10 years plus a right of renewal of 10 years, that's a couple of $1 million of funds that will go into charitable purposes.
So given that, would the option of a loan be acceptable, or are you looking solely for a grant?
The grant would be what we would want, but a loan would certainly be helpful. It may be that in wide-ranging discussions with council people, there may be opportunities for council to do some of this work themselves with utilising their own equipment. We've just looked at this as a cost on the outside if council weren't involved. They've got trucks and diggers and staff that could do it, but we're trying to keep that isolated if we need to.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Craig. Craig, within your costings, what are the resource consent fees in the council?
So it was $2,500 and another nearly $1,000 that we've been charged on top of that. So cold council fees are about $3,500 thus far.
And there's some more to come, is there?
Hopefully not.
Okay. Are you aware there's a fund that you can apply for if you're doing construction and things on council land?
Jeff Baker has led us by the nose in a lot of this project and has been, again, hugely supportive and helpful. But we haven't got to all the intricacies of that yet. Jeff tells us that, yes, I'll see what I can do, but we haven't been able to resolve that. The last project, the last cost was just on $1,000 for council staff and council input that was costed.
There is a council fund, so offline I'll get somebody.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll follow that up. Thanks.
And Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Craig. Probably on the same lines Councillor Johnson has asked, when you talk about $50,000 to $50,000 to $100,000 income, is it the net income, I mean profit, or the gross income? So if it is the gross income, what will you do?
This is a huge opportunity for the city because these funds will all go back. No, it will. We expect that our profit for charitable purposes will be well in excess of $50,000 annually. I mean, it's been run by voluntary labour, been funded by voluntary time, and the lease costs are obligations, but they're not significant costs in the lease, they're more nominal costs. We want to keep the facility spick and span and in keeping with the standards of the Esplanade, and hopefully we will be able to, over time, carry out upgrades on the project so that while we've got a lease of 10 years plus a right of renewal of 10 years, that we can extend the life of the project well beyond that with council support. And that might require, towards the end of the period, some major upgrades, but we hope that there'd be funding for that. So that the funds that can go back into the city, for us as a club, are really quite exciting. There are a lot of needy and not all large money amounts. Can I just share one situation for the Christmas lights, for example? There are two brothers who illuminate their home with Christmas lights. One of the brothers is bedridden. He is prone, he can't even lift his head. He operates his lights from computerisation. Our members help him and his brother set up the lights. We bought him a computer so that he can better run these lights. While to us it's a relatively small issue, for this young guy in his early 30s, that is his life. He can't walk, he can't get out of bed, he's got a limited life expectancy, but this is his life. Our miserable $2,500 has brought huge joy and pleasure, and there are hundreds of these little opportunities, not big, grandiose, for our press to talk about, Janine, because they're not big news events, but they are huge personal events for the people involved. And Lions is involved in these sort of things, so this $50,000 to $100,000 is pretty exciting in terms of the lives that it can improve.
Thank you.
Great. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Craig. Appreciate that. And again, your submission is in with all the others and will be debated. We appreciate you putting it in.
Thank you very much. All
right. Move on now to Aaron Fox, and that's submission 303. Welcome, Aaron. We've read your submission and take that as being read, and if you'd like to summarise and leave questions, time for questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for inviting me here to speak to you this morning. My name is Aaron Fox. I'm a resident of Bunnythorpe. My family and I moved there some 3 years ago. In a previous life, I was a senior manager in local government in Southland, looked after the Community Outcomes project for about 6 years. That's a regional project. And more recently, I was a manager of strategy and community. So in 2015, I was where you are, I think, looking after the long-term plan and the consultation document. So, I also see that for today's purposes I'm submitter 303, so I guess it's best to start with the military terminology to set off with. Proper planning and preparation prevents poor performance. That's a military adage, a British military adage born of centuries of hard-fought experience. I've learnt that the same truism applies equally to local government, where proper planning prevents poor performance. Unfortunately, I consider that the current LTP we've been looking at isn't well planned. I agree with your independent auditors. Quite simply, this 10-year plan is not credible beyond its early years. The Council can't afford to undertake everything in the LTP, yet the consultation document persistently asks for our opinions rather than for our responses to hard options, backed with facts and figures. By not linking finances closely to activities and projects, and by not presenting us with budgeted options, we ratepayers are faced with a credibility gap. Now, as a complete aside, what did ever happen to Goal 5 in the consultation document? It's missing in action. I'm still looking for it. But back to that credibility gap, that's my concern, that it can lead to ill-informed decisions and perverse outcomes. Where the Council simply can't afford to do everything, assumptions and compromises become policy by default. So in this document, much of the focus is on the central city. Now, I'm a fan of arts and heritage and city shaping, but only if this can apply to more than just Te Marae Ohine. Similarly, I'm all for safer streets and neighbourhoods, but again, only if this applies uniformly across Palmerston North. The standards which you apply here in the centre of the city have to be applicable elsewhere. Neighbourhoods should be free of trucks across Palmerston North, whether in Hokowhitu or in Bunnythorpe. Basic infrastructure should also be to the same standard. It's just not good enough to deny your rural villages on the basis of cost, or as Mayor Smith put it recently on national radio, cross-subsidisation. For example, your draft city growth plan, there's an urban design chapter which includes measures of success, city dashboards which have an overemphasis on the city centre here. Which brings me to my third problem with the document, the consultation document, because on page 14, you can have a map of the integrated plan. Now, on the top right-hand corner is a red, well, it looks like a jelly bean, gigantic one, 177-hectare jelly bean. That represents sustainable growth. What this map depicts is the North East Industrial Zone plus Kiwi Rail's plans to extend a freight hub right into Bunnythorpe. The land close to Bunnythorpe is still zoned rural, yet here it is in the consultation document as effectively a done deal. From my point of view, this is the subversion of democratic process by stealth. You're disenfranchising us. So it's a matter of perspective. From Wellington or the city centre here, northeast is far enough away to appear suitable for a freight hub and a ring road. For those of us who live in Bunnythorpe, however, the red stain on the map represents a social and environmental threat, if not a disaster. And please, before you write us off as NIMBYs, not in my backyard, let's consider the emerging international vocabulary of environmental justice and equity. A key concept in this vocabulary is the sacrifice zone, and that's defined as a geographic area that has been permanently impaired by heavy environmental alterations or economic disinvestment, often through LULU. Now there's a new term for us all here today, not NIMBY, but think of LULU, locally unwanted land use. There won't be any greener infrastructure or green corridors or low carbon future for those of us in the northeast. Be a lot of trains, a lot of trucks. Your consultation document asks for our suggestions. Well, here are some of mine. Concentrate on your core infrastructure, please. Nature Calls canvassed some strategic issues with respect to wastewater. However, you also need to maintain and upgrade your existing assets as a matter of course. That's why we pay rates. In Bunnythorpe, for example, our water, our stormwater, our sewage systems do need urgent work, and it's not being done. We were promised smoke testing of our wastewater infrastructure in 2020, but it's still not happened when we're well past COVID-19 now. In Bunnythorpe too, we have lethal roads. People die on those roads. They're simply too small and too old for the volume of heavy traffic that we see every day. The trucks continue to rumble along our road, Kairanga Bunnythorpe Road. Now, heavy traffic could be diverted, neighbourhood roads made safer, but no one ever comes to ask us about that. And this issue isn't just a city neighbourhood issue, it's Palmerston North-wide. Please stop waiting for someone else to create new infrastructure. From my perspective, much of the planning in the northeast of Palmerston North appears to be predicated on Waka Kotahi or Kiwi Rail spending money on infrastructure which the council itself should properly have decided to upgrade years ago. Surely that is the purpose of depreciating assets. Leave job creation or future economic development to central government and the private sector. Council's involvement with Kiwi Rail has confused councillors and staff alike as to local government's role in development. Now, no matter how long or loud some of your senior staff try and claim otherwise, 24/7 freight operations at a rail hub and the airport are not for the benefit of adjacent residential communities. And they're the ones we're all here to support. Do not renew your contract with Cedar. I've been involved with similar initiatives in Southland, where the creation of a regional economic development strategy was long on ambition and very short on detail. Done badly, regional economic development is nothing more than boosterism. That's promoting a place or an asset with extravagant claims. The freight hub, sorry I keep banging on about that, but it's on my front yard, promises 1,000 or more new jobs sometime in the future, but without any serious cost-benefit analysis by Cedar. I've asked for such a document, apparently it doesn't exist. Your money would be better spent, I contend, working with local MPs and the Chamber of Commerce and contracting in independent economic analysts as required. Good governance starts at home. Look, I found Goal 5 after all when I looked on the website. In my own experience of local government in Southland, good decision-making starts with getting out of the office or the council chamber and back into the community. If you genuinely want participatory, not representative democracy, then please spend time in your communities, our communities. After all, how you treat your smallest or most marginalised communities sets the standard for the rest of the city. So please, bring these significant issues to those most affected early. Do it early and be prepared to listen. Please be real and enjoy being challenged. What we're doing today in this room isn't democracy, it's not engagement, and it's really not participatory. It's a process. We're all ticking the LTP box that we have to every 3 years. So my final point is this. Your 7 council principles are inclusive, ambitious, open, bold, enabling, guardianship, caring. You need to apply these principles evenly, fairly, and at all times, please. Yet Bunnythorpe's experience since 2011 is of a council which has predetermined that our backyards are only good for industrial development. Our opposition to any such development, railways, roading for instance, is classified as a risk which needs to be managed. Our ageing infrastructure is a burden on the rest of the city. Indeed, it appears that our community would be best served by replacing long-term residents with new residents who might accept a degraded local environment as the norm. From our perspective, therefore, current council descriptors might rightly include, from our experience and our perspective, exclusive, closed, dismissive, uncaring. So really, in conclusion, I'd like to say, Bunnythorpe, please, we matter too. We're as much a part of Palmerston North as the city centre. Please, let us see our community's needs reflected fairly in your long-term plans as well. Please hear our concerns, and please work with us to deliver the safe, healthy and modern neighbourhood which we all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Aaron, for your staunch defence of Bunnythorpe. Are you involved with the Bunnythorpe Community Association? Do you go along to their meetings?
I certainly do, yes.
Yeah. So you would have had the opportunity to interact with staff and councillors on a regular basis then?
Yes, I have, yes.
Yeah. So are you aware of any other community that has that level of service across the city from council staff and elected members?
Can't comment on that. We've only been in Bunnythorpe 3 years, so we're still settling in. I have no idea, sorry.
There is no other community in the whole of our area that has regular meetings with council staff and elected members other than Bunnythorpe.
I'm pleased to hear we're leading the way. Great.
Good. Thank you.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Aaron, for your submission. If I have heard it rightly, you have been involved in a senior position with the local government for a long time. In your experience, what do you think Palmerston North City Council is doing better that we should follow? What can you tell us a single act council is doing right so that we can follow that?
Oh, God, well, you're listening to me today, so I appreciate that. Some councils mightn't go that far to listen to somewhat aggrieved people. I think there's a lot of good that the City Council is doing within the city area, I really do. I mean, when we moved here in 3 years ago, 2018, it's a more vibrant place than we left. There's a good arts and culture sort of basis to work from. Things are booming here. You have the military centre. You've got a university. You've got UCOL. You've got all sorts of assets here which are pumping. Things are good. There's a really good, strong basis to work from here, I think. So what Palmerston North does well is give people the opportunity to do things for themselves. So let's see more of that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Aaron. That's extinguished the time. We appreciate that, and your submission will be taken into debate. Thank you. Right, 305, Jim Jeffries. Welcome, Jim.
Well, good morning. It's interesting to find myself on this side of the fence. After about 25 years ago, I was a regular here, but seem to have neglected my role over those 25 years. So here I am again. But just to comment also, it's great to see so many councillors here today, hearing what the community has to say. That hasn't always been the case in past years, so well done. You will have read my submission, and I guess I'd just like to make a few more general comments and then perhaps highlight a couple of things that I do think are quite important. First of all, clearly the starting point for anything is actually getting the basics right, the three waters and transport, etc. But having just taken that as given, there's a couple of things that I saw as very positive in the plan, and they are around the two areas of active community and arts and heritage. With the active community, the 8% of rates spent in that area, I understand, is amongst the highest in the country. and I think that's a very positive thing for our city. Arts, that 8% is kind of a little bit out of proportion because arts and heritage find themselves down at 3% of the rates. I'm generally supportive of I guess, that direction. Perhaps a little bit underdone for arts and heritage. And while what I read there is pretty much a rollover from what is there in the past, I do see those things as positive. I thought perhaps just taking a little bit of sting out of that was the loss of the arts powerhouse direction. But underlying that, there hasn't been anything else taken out. But I hope that just by those words missing, that we're not looking at pulling back a little bit in that area of the arts. A couple of things that I think are quite important, and I have written them here, but I like to highlight them really because I see them as very important to the city. Streets for People in particular, that's just taken so long to get any real traction here, because if we go back to the early 2000s with City Heart, wasn't popular in the community by not for the good reason of developing the central city, but for a lot of other reasons. And I see it in there, and I think it's quite critical that we have a vibrant central city. The world is changing, and that vibrance is, I think, will provide our city people, our citizens, with an experience, I guess, more than just shopping. An experience which will bring them into the central city. So very important to invest in that Streets for People. Another one that is, I think, quite important, and I would hate to see it actually lost, is that I remember about 25 years ago getting on my mountain bike and cycling around a very rugged territory on the outskirts of the city. And it's been great to see that in those years since, that was a 32-kilometre circuit. It's great to see so much done since, but it hasn't reached the full 32 kilometres yet. And I think it's quite important for the link between Milson Line and Riverside Drive to be completed. It's just that little bit of silence there that makes me a little uneasy that it could actually be, it's one of those things that we'll look in 5 years, 6 years' time in hindsight and say, oh, we should have actually checked to make sure that was going to happen. If you look at the way in which those trails around the city are used by people, you'll start to see that the investment in there is actually something that is used by the people of the city. So very important to happen. The other thing that I see out there, perhaps I suspect it's probably a little bit on the horizon, but the earthquake strengthening of buildings is going to force it to be considered at some stage, is the library building. And having been on council when this new precinct was considered, it just nagged me a little bit about the risk associated with losing what is effectively an iconic building in Palmerston North. And I'd like to keep the fact that we should not be losing historic, iconic buildings like that in Palmerston North, even though you might look at efficiency and all those other things around the city, that I think we've got something very special there and we should look to retain it. I guess that's, you're available, I'm sure you read all the rest of what I put there, but I'll call a halt there and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks Jim, as always, well constructed. I think you've outlined well in terms of the positive things that you're speaking to, and and in writing there outlined some of the challenges what the future of local government may look like with government reform. I'll open it up for questions. Start with Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jim. Lovely to see you again. I think the brain of an accountant, but the soul of an artist. So I had a couple of questions based on your written submission. First off, you talk about square edge, and you said in your submission, its importance to the arts is often flies below the radar. And I wondered if you could explain what that means to you.
Interesting enough, it means a lot to me. My wife and I actually go we cycle into town every Saturday morning. It's become a routine for us over the years. And our destination is always for coffee in Square Edge. And we look forward there to the changes that take place in the displays on that ground floor. And I think it's just that it might seem in the total context of the city to be just a small thing, but it's not. It actually provides the opportunity for people like us to experience it and enjoy it, but also for the artists themselves, the opportunity to exhibit. I guess for an artist, it's got to be a frustrating thing to sit in your studio and produce things that only you see, and therefore the opportunity for artists to have an opportunity to exhibit is actually quite important. Not only that, though, if you look through the building itself, on the different floors, there are studios there and you say, where else could those studios be in the city? And they're providing an outlet for creative people. And I do think that our city as a place should actually be regarded as a creative place, a creative city in New Zealand. And there is one of the opportunities for those people to express themselves. Could go on a lot more about it.
I had a follow-up question. You talk about earthquake strengthening, Square Edge and the library, and I'm taking from that your general support for council strengthening its own heritage buildings. I wonder if you had a comment about buildings that we don't own in the city, and does council have a role there?
Well, it'd be nice to say yes, but I suppose the role is more in a legal sense to ensure that the legislation is seen through. But because I think if you look at the costs associated with just the council buildings, there's $150 million in there. I don't think the city council can afford to actually be putting money out there. In small ways, perhaps, but we've got, as a city, such a big capital investment. I read something at 1.4 billion. It's been climbing. It was 385 million 6 years ago. It's 760 million 3 years ago, and now it's 1.4 billion. That's a challenge enough for the city without actually putting money out outside.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Jim. Just wanted to clarify around the Milson to Riverside connection. The distinguishing feature of the rest of that loop is that it's off-road. Your views around the necessity of it being an off-road facility?
Yes, there are some practical difficulties in trying to solve that, but if you think early enough, and in particular if you look at the area that the council are developing just near James Line, that could fill a role in actually making sure that area is done. And if you look at it in blocks, I'm not sure I've got the solution for some of it without avoiding it on the road. But if it has to go there, then perhaps provision for safe cycling and safe walking along those places should be invested in.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Again, thank you for your submission, and everything will be taken into the debate. Right. Councillors, will just signal that we will break for a coffee break shortly, but we'll come to our next submission, which is Ymca Central. Andrew Savage, welcome. Councillors, that's submission 306, and we'll break for a short break just after this.
Morena. Ko Brendan Owens toko ingoa. Andy's actually behind me, so I'm Brendan, I'm the CEO of Ymca Central. Thank you for the opportunity today, Mr Mayor. Everyone recognises the song, most can hum it, every community deserves a Y, and quietly for over 175 years, the Y has made a positive difference to millions of families and communities worldwide. The Y is a unique charitable organisation that presents itself daily to many people as their local gym, recreation centre, after-school care provider, holiday program or camp. Whilst these programs and many more make up the Y's public presence, the key element of the Y that is not always immediately intangible is our rich history of strong family values, caring culture and a genuine wish to make a real difference to local communities and families. We're community-focused, regionally operated, but supported both nationally and internationally. This alone sets us apart from many other providers. The Y is at home in communities where other organisations are sometimes absent. We have connections, facilities, programs and services that others don't. We actively include people and give them a second chance, or in many cases, the only chance. We're committed to no one missing out. We provide access to opportunities in their neighbourhoods and to their community. In 2020, the Ymca Central and Greater Wellington, Ymca Greater Wellington merged to form the new Ymca Central entity. This transition has allowed us to consolidate head office resource and have a greater community impact across the lower North Island. The feedback from the merger has been great, and we are now experiencing growth in all program areas. In Palmerston North specifically, we currently provide dedicated programs to young people 5 to 18 years so that they can have more and better opportunities to access active recreation and play in local communities and neighbourhoods. We're insights-led, using a community-informed process to develop and deliver local programs, either directly or in partnership with others. We offer programs such as alternative education, youth guarantee, Oscar, and work with vulnerable youth through the justice system. Often these are people with complex needs who experience barriers to participation. Now that gives you a background, the submission to Council's 10-year plan is based on a revitalisation of our Park Road facility. We understand every community has a range of underutilised and dilapidating assets: community halls, sports clubs, courts, single-purpose sports facilities. We also understand that many communities don't have access to quality play and recreation opportunities, particularly in high deprivation areas. We also understand that many sports are experiencing declining participation, whilst at the same time experiencing increased compliance costs, challenges with capacity, as well as struggling to navigate the ever-depleting funding pool. The opportunity exists to transform our Park Road facility into a vibrant family recreational community hub, which will connect the community, bring families together to engage in play and recreation, and by doing this ensure that our tamariki have the physical literacy they need for lifelong wellbeing. The Y is a safe place where those that need our help can participate, have a sense of belonging, people can be themselves and feel safe. All this helps to contribute to more positive social and emotional wellbeing in our communities. Through effective community and stakeholder engagement and working with existing community providers, we can coordinate and implement a range of activations in our community to ensure no one misses out. This includes providing a home for the vast range of sports and clubs that don't need their own facility, but do need a space to belong and share with like-minded people. A place where they could have an office, some storage and a multi-purpose room to book sporadically for meetings, etc. The key, though, is that being a part of a vibrant hub that has enough revenue generated to ensure the clubs only need to contribute a small amount and not the 90% of costs as seen in other sports fields such as Fraser Park and Lower Hutt. The opportunity exists to provide a provision for family recreational facility which can go beyond just physical health and provide the new third place which can connect communities and contribute to more positive social and emotional wellbeing. Inclusive facilities that allow children to model the physical behaviours of their parents, providing opportunities to change behaviours from within the family unit as a proactive step towards building stronger, healthier families and communities in the future. Programs and services to engage with and introduce a new range of opportunities for disadvantaged youth, facilities that provide a proactive approach to social cohesion by encouraging involvement in the community and a focus on prevention of antisocial behaviour. Community health and wellbeing space that targets a less fortunate population, those in need of targeted health programs as well as young people, women and families. Community sports competitions and learn to play development sport programs utilising and existing relationships within Palmerston North. Kids play facilities and equipment that lessen the likelihood of anxiety in our children and help build resilience in kids. Culturally diverse and disability initiatives to provide equity, accessibility and healthy lifestyles for all. And community sports hub, an office space that enables community health and recreation providers to do their work without the worry of managing an asset and chasing funding. Our objective is to use our 175 years of experience working with communities coupled with our facility management expertise to activate communities through active recreation. We want to partner with council, sports clubs, RSTs, or the RST Sport Manawatu, schools and other facility owners and find ways of increasing revenue streams through our social enterprises, as well as sharing operational costs. We can also provide shared services support to hub partners and tenants, a constant challenge to many smaller organisations. The model is based on the WISE tried and tested social enterprise model, which seeks to have 3 key revenue streams to increase viability. This operating model enables other partners like sports clubs to focus their energies and volunteer time on delivering programs to tamariki and not on chasing funding to pay for administration costs. What's next? So pleasingly, the Y has been successful in obtaining strength and adapt funding through Sport New Zealand, meaning our vision for revitalisation of community hubs such as Park Road has been identified as a need. More pleasing is that Sport New Zealand now understand that the build it and they will come approach isn't the right approach, and that activating communities is all about people. The Park Road project has been identified as a pilot project through the YMCA and Sport New Zealand, but we need your help. So how's this different? With our community networks focus on activation and priority for no one missing out, we offer a different approach to hub development. We're keen to engage with communities of need before we identify underutilised assets. We want to work to activate those facilities before we focus on significant redevelopment. We will work with communities and their needs rather than applying the build it and they will come approach. Facility optimisation is about making the most of what is present in the first instance. We're ready to go, and we're keen to pilot this new approach with Palmerston North City Council, and we need your support. Fundamentally, we believe that every community deserves a Y. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Deputy Mayor, got a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Just a question to clarify. So you've talked about this community hub pilot that you're wanting to consider. I'm just trying to understand if what you're suggesting is that we would support the YMCA to establish a community hub which others are a part of, or whether you're requesting that the council establish a community hub which the YMCA would be a part of. Do you see what I mean? Like who's the lead in it, in the kind of that's what I'm just trying to understand from the proposal.
Well, at the moment, we have the facility and the location, and I think in this case, the Only Park location is the ideal location for this hub. And so we're suggesting that would be the lead, but working with council and Sport Manawatu and other providers to revitalise the premise that we currently have.
So, because you've got the building and we've got the land, I think, is the current arrangement. Do you feel that the building's in a state where it could be refurbished, or is it looking like a new premise?
Well, I think long term it would need something new, but I think the reality is that's quite some time away, and I think the need is now, and I think there's an opportunity to revitalise the building and activate parts of the community right now. I think there's opportunities available right now to activate certain parts of the community in the current location, but with a long-term goal of something more new, something more modern on the premise.
Just a further question, if I may. Thank you. That's really useful. Is the so YMCA Central is now including Wellington? Is that correct?
Yeah, so YMCA, the old YMCA Central entity, so it was, I think, 15 to 20 years ago, there was a Palmerston North YMCA and there was a Wanganui YMCA. Palmerston North and Wanganui merged to become YMCA Central. about 18 months ago, YMCA Central needed some help, and YMCA Greater Wellington supported YMCA Central, and that became one entity. That entity is called YMCA Central, although it was the former YMCA Greater Wellington. So YMCA Greater Wellington, essentially the Constitution just included the scope of Wanganui and Palmerston North and changed the name to YMCA Central.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so financially, is the YMCA in a position to invest in capital?
Yep. This is, I think our second or third hub development across the region. We're sort of partway through something similar in in Masterton at the moment. And so we do apply for funding from other sources such as Eastern Central and lotteries. So there are other funding options available here as well. But there is this kind of shift in the country to building these hubs, upper huts. Just about to kick off 13 mil with a redevelopment in Upper Hutt. I think there's still a question around whether that's the right thing to do. This money kind of turns up, and then there's a lack of kind of thought around the ongoing operational costs of these facilities, and that's the challenge that they're finding in Fraser Park, with the Fraser Park hub in Lower Hutt at the moment. And I think this is the models around being slightly different, thinking about the future and the ongoing operational costs, and not putting that cost onto these sports and clubs that actually don't have any money. Most of their revenue comes through Class 4 funding, which in places like Wellington, there's a shift away from allowing Class 4 funding to support sports clubs. So that's the challenge for the future, and this model's around an operating model that is sustainable.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much for your submission. Acknowledge the great work your organisation does in Palmerston North, mainly with youth, and again your submission will be debated with all the others, so appreciate you taking the time to present to us today.
Thank you.
Councillors, we will break, and for those that have just joined us in the gallery, kia ora and welcome. We have tea and coffee just out there. We're just going to have a short break because we've been going since 9 a.m, and we will reconvene here at 10 minutes past. All right, thank you. Kia ora tātou. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for allowing that little short break. We have everybody here for the remainder of our session one. There's just been a slight change to the order. Councillors, we will now jump to Alison Milden. Is Alison's here? Oh, she isn't. She was here. She's been sitting here for an hour. All right. Thank you, Alison. Well done. Councillor submission, 5:30. And Alison, you've been watching what all the other submitters have been going through, so we have 10 minutes there. We've read your submission, and if you turn your microphone on, thank you.
That hurt. Yes. I thought these people were before me. Sorry about that. Thank you. A neighbour said that she looked at the consultation document. She felt powerless. So do I, but here I am. But she sadly is not. So I'll get to the point, the vision. Small city benefits, large city ambition. To me, an awful contradiction in terms, but something perhaps about which success can be measured. So I'll take an example, motorised transport. One only has to be a driver to understand that city ambition has already taken away the small city benefits we once enjoyed. And the large sums of money being thrown into the hole are solving nothing. If anything, some changes are actually making matters worse. Is the vision still fit for purpose? In my opinion, no. And a slogan isn't a vision anyway, and this one is a mirage. The strategy, growth, with the implication throughout the plan being growth is good. More people, more business, more subdivision, more houses, more industry, more vehicles, more of everything, and more of the predictable adverse consequences, although these are not stated. Growth is change, and surely there are bottom lines to do with earth, water, and air. This is not just planning for now, but the base for a hopefully endless future. I almost said hopelessly. This requires a genuine understanding of sustainability, not just lip service to a word. What exactly is sustainable growth? When you are continuously gobbling up a finite resource on which life depends. Where are the bottom lines? Where are the honest, in-depth cost-benefit analyses that acknowledge not everything can be measured in financial terms? Which leads me to the sales pitch. Palmerston North City is the misnomer foisted upon us via the wisdom of local body amalgamation. But isn't this a plan for a territory, a district much larger than urban Palmerston North? Well, reading the glossy documents, one wouldn't think so. It's an entirely urban-focused plan. The green space is just a place to fill in. And among the many urban-focused words, I couldn't find one photo depicting anything resembling rural life. If you look at this, I presume you've all got it, on page 14. we have our integrated plan. It says it all to me. For example, 5 photos, all about urban life and all about growing. Growing means bigger, more. An area that's light green, but only identified in the key as city boundary. No named roads or features to identify those boundaries. And if urban is an identified area, which it is, what about rural? And to be really accurate, what about 2 colours? One for areas of lifestyle blocks and one for farmland. But hang on, that might illustrate how little is left of the finite, nationally significant, productive soils into which a small town making big city has already encroached, and which this plan shows it is hell-bent on continuing. What a battle for 30 years to get any traction with city planners regarding the protection of soil. Yet still it goes on, the insatiable nibble, nibble, nibble. Page 10 of the City Growth Plan, and I quote, "What do we want to achieve? Residential land exceeding demand by 20%. This means a constant supply of at least 1,800 greenfield residential sections." This doesn't mean a one-off, but continuous, always having this in stock. In the small print, page 7 of the same plan, one reads that a new area to the west of the city, Kiki Whenua, has been rezoned residential, Kairanga soils. And council has started working with landowners at Okauteri, Ashurst, Kakatangiata, Roxburgh Crescent and Flyger's Line to initiate planning processes to rezone land for more housing. Unbelievable. The Flyger's Line area has been contested over and over, but here it is again. The area bounded by number 1 line and Rongatea Road seemingly already lost. River flats already gone to urban development and lifestyle blocks. But that's still not the end. More, more, more. Although at last there is consternation being expressed at a national level about New Zealand's death by 1,000 cuts approach to development, one that simply doesn't protect the values of finite, nationally significant natural assets, in this case soils, the report Land 2021. On this plan goes, this plan. This is an area in which matters of sustainability can honestly be raised, but the plan simply doesn't. Yet gone, it's gone forever. Then another nibbling point under housing. Quote, "There is significant capacity for new lifestyle blocks which are directed away from high-class soils." Where? And lifestyle blocks. What about urban sprawl? What about the subdivision limits that were supposed to have been finalised in relevant provisions in the district plan? The light green area is just a place for the urban city to spread in your minds from this plan. Which brings us to the boldly marked Regional Freight Ring Road, running, if you know, right along Kairanga-Bunnythorpe Road, through prime soil, prime farming land. then a crossing over the river, a ring around what bridge, don't know. How about a moratorium on all subdivision and talk of subdivision of rural land until the national policy statement related to biodiversity and protection of productive soils is gazetted in 2021, and to please be considered before the national policy statement for urban development. Now that would really show some vision. Having pushed the city boundary to Kairanga-Manithorpe Road against the wishes of residents in that area, i.e. high-quality soils, and effectively slicing the Kairanga community in two, the diagram designers don't even have the decency to mark Kairanga as a place. Throughout, the plan speaks about the purpose of local government being to promote the social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being of communities in the present and for the future. With the noise of heavy and light traffic using Kairanga-Manithorpe Road now, life for many in that community is almost unbearable, already requiring at least double glazing, which doesn't stop the shuttering, and producing conditions that mean people are unable to conduct their recreational working lives with enjoyment. I wonder how many of you have actually driven along that road and envisaged what this freight road means.
Alison, we've out of time there. Is there anything you want to sum up with?
Well, I hope that you go on to say, this will require genuine collaboration with landowners and other stakeholders. What does that mean? This is what we're going to do, but we'll talk to you about it.
Thank you.
See, I'm angry. I'm always angry.
Yeah, look, thank you. There's a little bit of, you may want to read some of our documents, other documents, obviously you haven't read, around our protection of Class 1 and 2 soils. Like one of our other presenters this morning, Kiki Whenua is not on high-class soils, and we're not building over Kairanga loam soils. So, look, I'm happy to have a discussion with you offline about that. But look, thank you for your submission. It will be debated along with everybody else. Thank you. All right, we move now to the Palmerston North Women's Health Collective, Jean Hera, number 414. And Jasmine, thank you. Welcome. Now, you've submitted many times, so you know the process.
Yes, and just a little reminder, we're Te Hā Ohini Ahoni, Palmerston North Women's Health Collective. Kia ora koutou. I'm Jean Hera. I'm Manager and Community Health Worker.
Kia ora, ko Jasmine Tokuingawa. I'm a Massey social work student doing my placement with the collective.
So, I've written a little bit about the collective. I think most of you know who we are. We're just a very small group. We're also the only resident group at Te Whare o Ngā Wāhine, Palmerston North Women's Centre, which is a council-owned building provided at a very low rental. We are regular submitters, and it's great to have this opportunity. We see a great many low-income and vulnerable women, high proportion of Māori women, and also want to really emphasise the needs of our low-income citizens. So at this time, free and low-cost community services are even more important because of housing shortages and high rents and things like that. I guess in terms of our underlying guiding principles that we want to see in the 10-year plan, the ones we want to emphasise, we want to firstly commend the recent establishment of the Māori wards for Palmerston North City Council, and also acknowledge that this is important alongside a developing and strengthening relationship with our mana whenua rangitane. We have a very strong commitment to community development and support for community groups. We want to see this very strong in the 10-year plan. These groups do a lot for our most vulnerable citizens on very limited budgets. We also want a city where everyone can participate fully, so that really emphasises inclusion of those on low incomes. We have a strong commitment to the natural environment and want to emphasise the urgent attention needed by Council on climate action. We do have concerns when we hear that the proposed plan is reportedly inconsistent with the Council's financial strategy. We understand that this will have to be addressed. However, we also want to see the best long-term infrastructure options and have been long supporters of land-based wastewater system, for example. Transparency is really important to community engagement and active participation of the community, and we query the clarity in terms of action of the plan, and we'd like Council to kind of review this. It's hard to find things to disagree within the plan, but we're left searching for the actions, and we'd like to see sort of a true action-oriented approach as underlying commitment. I think other councils might be clearer about asking for feedback about what should be left out or left in or taken out. And I know the City Council's done this to some extent previously. This could be linked to proposed rates increases required for the different options. Because one of our key areas we want to talk about is Council's role in community development, and we have challenged the definition that's in the plan, which to me is not a good definition at all. I have a long involvement in community development, and I know that the City Council historically has had a variable track record on community development. It's not simply the process of enabling diverse groups to share concerns, plan for the future and capitalise on opportunities and strive towards wellbeing. Community development is about being community-led, bottom-up, involving grassroots communities, and particularly those who do not have a strong voice. So we would like to see that in any definition. Also, Te Tiriti o Waitangi is central to community development in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and that's really important to emphasise. I've sort of included quite a lot of discussion, including an earlier paper that was put forward by community leaders about community development, and that still really stands today, and I've got a copy here if anyone wants to see that. I'll go on to the funding and resources for community groups. We very much appreciate and want to acknowledge Council's continued commitment to supporting not-for-profit community sector, and particularly ourselves, we're really appreciative of the support that we have had through Council, and that has been awesome in our situation where we are quite challenged with funding after getting a big funding cut from the DHB. We understand that the draft community support policy referred to in Connect to Communities plan is not yet available, and that makes it a bit difficult to comment on. But I did notice in the Finance and Audit Committee the statement again that Council has says that relies on having a strong community and voluntary sector to support vulnerable communities and people in general. So I think ongoing increases to community fundings, and for us, the Small Grants Fund, the Community Development Small Grants Fund is really important. So we hope that Council will strengthen its commitment to supporting community. I'll let Jasmine talk about housing.
So we want to commend the council on how well they've done with housing, and just kind of focus on the importance of capping the social housing rents to 25%, just to ensure that families on low incomes are able to provide good food and a warm home for their family. I'm quite lucky. I've got a very fair landlord who hasn't put my rent up for the past few years, but, you know, just feeling for those other people out there that, you know, don't have that advantage. Yeah, that's kind of what I've got here.
Okay. Yeah, we're strong supporters and want to see council keep strengthening its involvement in housing, and certainly we do support the housing groups that call for that capping the rent at 25% of their income, and taking, council taking a leadership role in housing. In terms of community facilities, we support the proposal to list Hancock House as a strategic asset under the significance and engagement policy, but we also want to say, well, don't forget the other facilities are like Te Whare o Ngā Wahine, the Palmerston Women's Centre, that we work, that we're the resident group of, and that we do a lot of the administration for as the only resident group. We'd like to see this protection for that as well. I noticed that health is discussed in the 10-year plan, and we're certainly interested in being involved with any developments there, and also acknowledge that the health structure is changing with DHB is going to be abolished. I'll let you talk a bit to the importance of the services and activities for low-income families.
Yeah, so as a student, we're a one-income family, and I've got a couple of young children, and I want to commend the council again. Coming from a different part of the country, I've really noticed how many free or low-cost events are held for families throughout the city, and we participate in quite a few of those, and I'd just love to see that continued, you know, in the upcoming years. Just ensures everybody can participate, and the Esplanade, the mini golf at the Esplanade, sounds like a really awesome idea, just keeping in mind that the cost isn't too high for those lower income families so they can participate, and keeping an eye on where it's put so that other amazing things that are already there aren't kind of taken away, or but yeah, no, I'm really excited to see what events and things you've got planned coming up.
And just lastly, just to comment on the natural burial option, we submitted about the importance of not forgetting that, because it was something that was looked at in the past and then kind of was lost along the way. We hope to see that work continue there, and also full certification as a natural burial site as part of this development. So, thank you for this opportunity.
Great, thank you. And I'll go to Councillor Dingwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Jean and Jasmine, for submitting to us today. You've covered quite a lot in your submission at the moment, but I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit on the idea to cap rents for social housing at 25%, and what impact that would have on the clients that are coming through your doors.
Yeah, well, I know that's the housing groups support that, and we certainly do as well, because, yeah, I mean, when your rentals are higher, and those in the council housing are on low incomes or on benefits. So, yeah, any higher than that, and it really eats into money for food and medical care and everything like that. So we really support that 25% target.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Great. Look, thanks very much for your submission, and we will debate it fully when we deliberate here. Thank you. All right, sorry about that, councillors. The other questions in the queue there. But we'll move now to our next submitter, Brian Jeffries, and submission number 120. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you for inviting me to come and here today and do this. I was fortunate. I have done it once with the Esplanade Users Forum, so I've got a bit of practice there. So I'm here to talk about mobility scooters for free hire at the Esplanade Ymca Bridge, hope I said that right, and on the river walking tracks. My inspiration comes from New Plymouth, where when I go to New Plymouth I can get a mobility scooter and go along the coastal walkway or through Pukekura Park. An interesting thing from Pukekura Park's statistics over the last Christmas holidays, when the lights are on, they had over 300 people hired their scooters during that time, which I believe most of those people would never have gone through the park because they couldn't walk it. I have spoken to Lyndon at the Lido, and he has advised that the scooters could be housed at the Lido, and their staff would be interested, or he would have his staff look after the scooters in hiring and making sure they're recharged each time they come back. We're looking at 2 scooters at the moment. I believe that the area that is there could easily hold up to 10 probably, but in one row there would probably be about 6. I've met with Aaron Phillips from the council, and we have discussed many things. We've also managed to get all the papers that the Taranaki people use, and also there is a scooter at the eyesight here which has rules, and the easy living people, along with the rest of their group, have advised that they will supply 1 scooter to the City Council on the same basis as the one at the Lido, at the eyesight, which is that the council will look after it and maintain it. They are also willing to give to the council a scooter that retails for $5,300. They would allow it at cost price of $4,000. I have arranged with the Olive Tree Trust, and they have been back to me that they will supply $6,000 to buy that scooter, and $2,000 of that would be setting up fees. I've met with the Mayor, and he suggested that I come here. I wasn't that happy on that, but I'm here. And the other thing that I want to say, that I've already started an advertising campaign. Some of you may have seen it in the Guardian, or that was on the radio this morning, and that was quite interesting. Those guys are quite funny. So I really want to advertise it because we have had scooters before that were in town but never used. I think this is a different situation out there. We've got a beautiful bridge across the river, the walkways are fine, and through the esplanade, which is our main garden in town, I think with the Lido being where it is, it's really just suited for it. So I suggested, I said to the guys on the radio, I would like to have at least 50 scooters there for the opening day, and he said, oh, my mind's racing already. I think we could organise a round the bridges race, mobility scooter race. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Brian, for... I've just got a really quick question, just in terms of the New Plymouth example that you gave us. Can you tell, do you know how they funded the scooters they've got there, and how many have they got?
How many scooters they've got altogether? I saw about 10 at Pukekura Park, and I think they've got about 8 at the... They're run by the Taranaki Disability, and they have a place about a block away from the coastal walkway, and if you ring them, they will send somebody down to the Pukekura Park to get one out for you when you're ready, and they fund half of the salary of the manager of Taranaki Mobility. So, but the Lyndon has advised that he would charge the council $1,440, I think it is, $30 a week to... No, I might be wrong there, and I haven't bought those figures, I'm sorry, but it's better than we originally, or when I say we, I'm talking about Aaron and I, when we discussed it, maybe up to 2,000 sort of thing, so it didn't reach that figure.
Yes, okay. If I could, Mr Mayor. So the funding for the scooters themselves up in New Plymouth, do you know where that funding comes from?
Oh, sorry, the City Council.
City Council, thank you very much.
District Council there, isn't it?
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Brian.
Sorry.
No, that's right, and it's great that you came in today. Brian, how much do you pay when you hire at New Plymouth for this?
Free to charge.
Oh, okay, so it's free.
Free to hire.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
When I first did it, it was done from their swimming pool, and I left my keys there. But once they got to know me, it was already on the computer. Something I didn't mention was that Lyndon suggested that he could organise it that once you've filled in the form, so a second time and user they will supply with a card, just like a swimming person gets, and you would only need to present your card to hire it. I would like to see it free to hire, but if there was a reasonable charge, $5 or something that would help the usage. And maintenance costs, when I spoke with the Mayor, he talked about the council mechanics could look after it as part of their fleet. AI, the people that do the servicing charge $59 for a service.
Right. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Brian. Just had a question here.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. So you've had some success around fundraising, it sounds like. So how much, have you got a dollar figure of how much further funds you need to raise for the scooters themselves?
Well, if the council took it over, which I'm hoping, the council would then fund it. At the moment, it will be nothing to start.
And that's what I'm trying to understand is how many scooters, how many dollars are we talking about?
Yeah, if the council doesn't take it over, I would probably need to find funding, not immediately, but the summer would be the months that these are used for 2, 3, 4 more scooters.
Great, thanks, and that's time.
Thank you, Brian. Excuse me. Sorry to the rest of the councillors that wanted to ask questions, but thank you for your submission. And again, like others, we will be debating it, and I appreciate the work you put in. Right. We now go to submission 507, Plant to Plate. Jacinda Duca. Welcome, Jacinda.
Good morning. Kia ora, I'm Jacinda. I've been the coordinator of Plant to Plate Aotearoa for the last 7 years, and I also run the gardening program during our school sessions. Plant to Plate is a small organisation, and we've been working in primary schools in the Manawatu for the past 12 years. We believe teaching our tamariki the essential life skills of vegetable gardening and cooking with the produce that they grow. It's going to have lifelong benefits for them, not just for them, but for the whole community. We encourage sustainability and care of the environment and tackle these issues early in life to ensure they become second nature for these students. Plant to Plate acknowledges and supports the Council's plans for resource recovery in schools and early childhood centres, and development of community gardens and the community events that promote these amazing spaces. Yeah, any questions?
Thank you, Jacinda. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Jacinda, for coming in and showcasing some of the work that Plant to Plate does. Is there anything in particular that you're looking for Council to do?
Well, I really support the idea of this resource recovery that you're thinking of investigating. Obviously, schools have a large amount of consumables, and it's inevitable that a lot of these end up in the refuse stations. The problem with making this happen in schools is the amount of education that's going to be required and the ongoing monitoring of compost bins and the recycling stations in the schools. We do think that together with, sorry, I've forgotten their name, the Enviro Schools program and Plant to Plate, we can together come together and make sure that this works smoothly in schools by supporting the schools and just making sure that it is happening.
So in terms of resource recovery, you're talking about food composting?
Food waste, and not just food waste, but just obviously schools and the upkeep in schools. I find a lot of the time we'll go and the caretakers have been out and they've been caring for the grounds, and everything sort of ends up in the compost bin, and the compost bin gets higher and higher, and nobody's taking care of it, so it ends up just getting emptied and taken down to the dump.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dingwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Jacinda, for your submission. With the resource recovery in schools, have you seen an increase in waste, or have you seen a difference in waste with the schools that are doing the schools and lunch programs?
Yeah, I've been asked this question quite a few times. So far this year, Plant to Plate hasn't been to any schools that has had the Food in Schools program running. We are off to Somerset School tomorrow. I'm not sure if I think they do have the Food in Schools program running. So I will monitor that. I know that there has been quite a bit of food waste, but I think that leftover food has been outsourced to other groups, which is brilliant. Yeah.
And one more question, if I may. So you've been operating for about 12 years. Has the amount of schools that you've taken on increased or decreased, and how is your resourcing around that at the moment?
Yeah, so every year we're getting new schools. In the last year we've had 4 new schools that have not participated in Plant to Plate ever before. Every year I send out, beginning of term 3, an email to all the schools. Now we have to run a ballot system now because we've only got 40 sessions that we can work with during the year. Last year we had 14 schools apply, some of them wanting up to 7 sessions each. That's why we're running a ballot system now. We'd love to be able to run, we'd love to, and we could easily run 2 or 3 sessions a week, but because we rely on volunteers and our funding and whatnot, it's impossible at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Jacinda. Just wanted to understand a little bit more about the collaboration between Enviro Schools and sort of which schools you're in, which schools they're in, and how much sort of overlap there already is.
Yep. So we've worked with Enviro Schools before, and we've sort of sat down and nutted out a few ideas, but we haven't quite sort of come together to work in unison. They focus a lot more on environmental, whereas we are vegetable gardening and that sort of thing. I'm sure there is a way that we can work together because there are things that overlap, like obviously the composting and the water care and all of that.
So in terms of being in the same schools, though, do you find that you're sort of showing up at the same school that Enviro Schools is already at, or are there some that aren't yet the same?
So a lot of the Enviro Schools have Plant to Plate. Actually, I'm pretty sure most of them do because they're obviously thinking along those lines. We don't turn up at the school when Enviro Schools are there, though. Right. Sort of is, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you, Jacinda. Thank you for all the great work that Plant to Plate does in our community. And I was just at Somerset School early this morning for a blessing.
There's some lovely new garden beds there.
Yeah, no, they're going well. So, yeah, good work. And we thank you for the submission. Again, it'll be debated with our others. Right, councillors, we move to our last, but certainly not least, submission number 541 for this session. So I invite the Pacifica Fusion, aka the Pacifica Pride Educators. Kia ora te lafo.
Talofa lava.
Talofa lava, malo lelei. Bolivinaka, whakalofalahi atu, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor and councillors. Thank you for this opportunity to be present. My name is Tracy Mawhileo, and I'm seated here beside Helen Talamai-Vau, who is the coordinator of the committee for the Pacifica Fusion Committee. So we sit here today with some of our other committee members, but really we're sitting here bringing the voice of many more. As we speak, around 400 students Pacifica students around Palmerston North, Wanganui, perhaps reaching up to Taranaki Horowhenua, are preparing for Pacifica Fusion 2021. Behind them are families, their schools and communities for what is Palmerston North City's biggest Pacifica event, has been running since 2005. We're in our 16th year, minus last year, COVID, when it didn't happen. This is not just a Pacifica Secondary Schools festival. It's not just about dance and culture, although it's all of that. It's also an educational event that is showing to have impact across generations of Pacifica communities. There are categories which are academic as well as artful, which have expanded over that year over the years it's been operating, including debate. Hopefully there's some future city councillors coming through there. Speeches, essays, science projects, cinematography, art, and more. Can we go to the next slide, please? So why is Pacifica Fusion important? Across New Zealand, the Pacifica population is growing. The Pacifica population is also youthful compared to Māori, compared to Asian populations, compared to the New Zealand European majority. Pacific is a more youthful population. So as a city, if we do well with our Pacific youth, we are future-proofing our city and indeed, I would say, Aotearoa New Zealand in the Oceania region. Aotearoa New Zealand is a Pacifica nation, and I want to acknowledge here today mana whenua of this place in which we meet, Rangitane. So there are historical, there are genealogical, cultural, constitutional links between New Zealand and the Pacific that are quite close. So it's Pacific people in New Zealand, that's part of the history that makes it important for cities to consider the Pacifica profile. And did you know that in the last census, it was shown that Samoa was one of the most commonly spoken languages in Palmerston North City, after English, Te Reo, and Chinese. Thank you, Auntie Helen. Pacifica Fusion is also a community catalyst linking local and central government. So, for example, last year the Ministry of Education released the Pacific Education Action Plan, which has a vision around diverse Pacific communities. Learners and their families are safe, valued, equipped to achieve their education aspirations. By the City Council supporting Pacifica Fusion and seeing this as a city event, not just as a small thing for a particular ethnic community. And through this committee here, we can help local government and central government aspirations, as well as our community aspirations, be realised. Schools and their families travelling from outside of Palmerston North, they come in hordes, we fill up the Regent for 2 days, they book accommodation, they eat plenty, I'm sure KFC nearly, I won't mention that. So, you know, it's great, it boosts the local economy. What is more, I notice in the plan that you're looking for events outside of that October to March period, and bang smack in the middle of the year is Pacifica Fusion. So we meet that part, tick, Pacifica Fusion in the plan. Can we please have the next slide? So Pacifica Fusion is established, its success is proven. We can mention, and sustained. So over a 16-year period, evidence that its governance is good, and staffed entirely by volunteers. So the volunteers, us and our colleagues, work in different professional roles in health and education, social services, business around our city. Some of us, yes. And so I wanted to mention 2 stories, but also thinking of this next generations, our next generations of Pacific young people. And I've got 2 examples here. These 2 young adults are making waves in New Zealand society and in their professions. Sonia Withers is a lecturer in textiles at the School of Design. She won the wearable arts category when she was a student at Palmerston North Girls High of Samoan heritage. She went and did her degree. She's worked in New York in the industry, back in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That is part of the proven success of Pacifica Fusion. Adam Snow, his mother, is here. Says that Pacifica Fusion helped him realise his potential. He's completed a music degree. He's up and coming in the music industry, making videos and music with some of the top New Zealand producers. There are many more Pacific young people that are part of the beauty of Palmerston North. And Pacifica Fusion helps them be successful and helps put Palmerston North on the map. Right, next slide. Right, so what is needed in the 10-year plan from our Pacifica Fusion perspective? We would want to see more that intentionally unleashes the yet untapped Pacifica and Palmy potential. You can talk to us more about that. So funding, we notice in the Connected Communities plan that there's a statement like offering funding expertise, but actually there's not much listed about increasing the base funding. So Pacifica Fusion costs around 40 grand to operate. In previous years, Palmerston North City Council has provided the fees for the Regent hire, and the rest is got from fees and other grants. Of course, a big team of volunteers. But this year, that funding is no longer available. We'd like to see in the future that Palmerston North can get behind this and see this as a city event, increase that funding to community groups and such events like this that have such potential. And in the background, I guess above all that, is we'd like to submit to see a strengthened Pacifica visibility throughout Palmerston North City Council, plans, policies, processes and priorities. Before we finish, the last thing we'd like to do is just to waiata. So I'd like to ask our other members to come and sing, and we'll also like to ask Councillor Dingwall to join us. This is a Samoan waiata, and it's a song of thankfulness and gratefulness, and we certainly are grateful to be a part of the fabric of Palmerston North, and we want to be in the future and make even bigger contributions.
Whawhetai I le atua, lena tātou tupuai, ina ua na whawhafua, ia te tātou umane, ia pepese, Alleluia, whawhetai, ia pepese, Alleluia, whawhetai.
Thank you.
Time for questions?
Right. We've got a few questions. I may start. So I was unaware that Pacifica Fusion, do we not fund it anymore?
It's always been for the venue, but not this year.
So we're not funding it this year?
No, not the same way. The funding has changed, and our funding is coming from Creative New Zealand. Total.
Okay.
But I'd just like to say that if you see the Pacifica Fusion poster for this year, it's still got the Palmerston North City Council logo on it, and that is our gift back to the city for this year.
It's for the city.
But it may not continue next year if there's actually no funding.
Okay, I was unaware that it happened, as I'm sure some other councillors are too. Can I just ask also, because we have our wider Pacific community come, do Horowhenua, do Manawatu, do Wanganui, do other councils put anything in?
No, this is a Palmerston North initiative. It's always been a Palmerston North initiative, and the Regent is the only venue that can cater for the numbers. So the invitation has always been put out to Horowhenua, Tararua, Rangatiki, up to as far as New Plymouth. So we've always put it out that way, but it is actually a Palmerston North initiative, and it will remain in Palmerston North. So it's always been at a local level.
Right, okay, thank you. I'll open it up. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for this great submission. So it's 40K to run the entire show.
Yes, we did the budget a couple of days ago, and it's 40K. It's always been between 20 and 30. This year it's actually 40K.
And how much of that did you apply to? So you've applied to creative communities.
Well, Creative New Zealand, we've applied for 29K.
29K, okay. And that's to Creative New Zealand?
Yes. And the rest we find that ourselves, and that's through the registrations fees, and because there's a lot of things that's not catered by funding, and in Pacific events it's about the food as well. We actually feed all our volunteers.
And I was just wanting to check, so have you been talking with our community funding advisors around?
No.
No, okay.
No, I did get an email to say things changed a little bit this year, and but in all fairness, though, Creative New Zealand have come forward to say that they will fund what we need, and we've only asked for the 29k. The rest we will find ourselves.
Can I quickly ask why you asked for the 29k instead of the whole amount?
Because, you see, the rest isn't funded by, you know, we're talking about food and T-shirts and things that's not actually funded by funding, you know.
Okay.
There are booths.
And we have information booths, and we
They
usually
pay a
don't-
fee?
Yeah, they will pay a fee, and that all goes towards prize giving,
Right.
which is also not funded. So we've not taken that away.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Look, I'm sorry, we do have a number of questions, but we're running short of time. We've got another session to start very shortly. So, look, I welcome you to talk to our officers as well, who are up just behind you there. And thank you for your submission. Thank you for everything you do in our community and for the Pacifica people, your Pacifica community here. You're very valued, and we appreciate your submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, councillors, we will break and reconvene at 1 p.m. for the second session. See you all back then.